For 50 years, an IRA passed from parent to child was simple. The kids inherited it, and they could stretch the withdrawals across their remaining lifetimes. Sometimes 30 years, sometimes 40, all of it growing, tax-deferred. In January 2020, one paragraph in one bill killed it. Now most non-spouse beneficiaries have 10 years. Every dollar comes out as ordinary income, and in July 2024, the IRS finalized rules that made it worse. But there are still 4 moves a retiree over 60 can make right now to protect their family. Let me show you what changed. I've spent the better part of 2 decades reading IRS publications, regulations, and revenue procedures so the people I sit across from don't have to. And honestly, the part I find hardest is this. Most of the families I've seen damaged by this rule had no idea it existed until the parent had already passed. By then, the planning window was shut. You're watching this in time. That's the difference. Back to the rule. For 50 years, an adult child who inherited a traditional IRA could stretch the withdrawals across their own life expectancy. A 50-year-old who inherited a $500,000 account from a parent could draw it down over 30-plus years, paying tax only on the small annual required minimum distribution and letting the rest of the account compound, tax-deferred, the whole time. That was the Stretch IRA. It was the most reliable estate planning tool middle-class families had. It's gone. The Secure Act, signed in December 2019, took effect for deaths occurring on or after January 1, 2020. For most non-spouse beneficiaries, the new rule is simple. The inherited account must be fully emptied by December 31st of the 10th calendar year following the original owner's death. Inherit in 2026, you're at zero by the end of 2036, 10 years. That's it. The math is brutal. A $500,000 inherited IRA that used to spread across 30 years now compresses into 10. 3 times the annual distribution. And it doesn't land on retirees. It lands on your adult children. Working age, highest earning years, in the middle of paying for kids in college or a mortgage at the top of the market, suddenly handed a tax bill they didn't see coming and can't refuse. Every dollar comes out as ordinary income, federal, state, local. I sat across from a man named Robert at a retirement planning session last year. He was 72. His mother had passed in early 2020, leaving him $480,000 in a traditional IRA. He thought he had 30 years to drain it. His CPA explained the new rule to him in 2023. By then, 3 of his 10 years were already gone. He had to compress what was left into 7. The extra federal tax costs projected across those 7 years came in around $80,000 he wouldn't have owed under the old rule. He said something I've heard in different words, more times than I can count. I don't understand how a rule this big could change without anyone telling us. I didn't have a good answer for him. The bill was 1,500 pages long. The 10-year rule was 1 paragraph buried inside it. The IRS doesn't write to beneficiaries, and it was about to get worse. For 4 years, there was a question the IRS wouldn't answer. The law said the account had to be empty by year 10. It didn't say whether you had to take an annual required minimum distribution along the way, or whether you could let the account ride and pull everything at the end. Big difference for the family. The IRS shrugged. In 2022, they issued proposed regulations saying yes, annual RMDs were required in years 1 through 9 if the original account owner had been passed their own RMD start date when they died. That created enough confusion that the agency waived penalties for missed inherited RMDs for 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. 4 years of waivers. 4 years of letting beneficiaries assume the rule wouldn't apply to them, while quietly drafting the regulation that would say it had applied to them all along. Then, in July 2024, they finally published 260 pages of final regulations and confirmed the position. Starting in 2025, if the parent was already taking their own RMDs at the time of death, the adult child must take annual RMDs in years 1 through 9 and empty the account by the end of year 10. 2 distribution rules, 1 account, at the same time. And buried in those regulations is the detail that ambushes families who thought the waiver years bought them time. The 10-year clock doesn't restart in 2025. It runs from the original owner's date of death. So if your mother died in 2021, the account must be empty by the end of 2031. The penalty waiver years still count toward the clock. You don't get them back. I want to be direct about what this means at the kitchen table. If you inherited in 2021 from a parent who was already in RMDs, you're now looking at annual distributions from 2025 through 2030, plus a final drain in 2031. 7 distributions instead of 10. Front-loaded into a window the IRS didn't bother to warn anyone about. If you miss one of those annual RMDs, the penalty is 25% of the amount you should have withdrawn. Catch it within 2 years, and the IRS drops it to 10%. Either number on an inherited account hurts. But not every beneficiary gets the 10-year hammer. There are 5 exceptions, and the third one catches families completely off guard. The 10-year rule is the new default, but it isn't universal. 5 categories of beneficiary, called eligible designated beneficiaries, can still use something close to the old stretch. 1. The surviving spouse. A spouse can roll the inherited account into their own IRA, treat it as if it had always been theirs, and take RMDs based on their own age. 2. A minor child of the deceased account holder. They get to use their own life expectancy until they reach the age of majority, which under IRS rules is 21. Then the 10-year clock starts. 3. A disabled beneficiary, as defined by the IRS. 4. A chronically ill beneficiary, also IRS defined, with documentation requirements. 5. And this is the one nobody knows about. A beneficiary who is not more than 10 years younger than the original account holder. A sibling, a longtime partner, an older friend. Anyone within a 10-year age band of the deceased can stretch the inherited account over their own life expectancy. I met a woman named Patricia at a tax clinic. She was 68. Her brother, 3 years younger, had passed and named her as beneficiary on his IRA. Her broker told her she had 10 years to drain it. She didn't. She was within the 10-year age band, which made her an eligible designated beneficiary, and she could have stretched the account over the rest of her life. The broker didn't know the rule. Patricia paid an extra $30,000 in federal tax before her accountant caught it the following year. I tell that story for one reason. The rule is genuinely complicated, and even the people you're paying for advice get it wrong. Get a second opinion in writing before you act on inherited account guidance. I mean that. But there's one loophole the Secure Act didn't close, and it's the most important thing in this video. Roth IRAs got the same 10-year haircut. A non-spouse beneficiary who inherits a Roth IRA also has to empty the account by the end of year 10. But here's the thing the Secure Act couldn't change. Roth distributions are tax-free. So the 10-year drain on an inherited Roth is an administrative inconvenience, not a tax disaster. The account stops growing tax-free at year 10, sure, but every dollar that comes out clean. No federal tax, no state tax, nothing. This is the loophole that's still left. And if you're a parent in your 60s or 70s with a traditional IRA, you want your kids to inherit well, it's the highest leverage planning move you can make. If you spend your remaining years systematically converting traditional IRA dollars into Roth dollars, paying the conversion tax yourself at your own retirement tax rate, you hand your children an account that comes out tax-free during their 10-year window. You absorb the tax at probably the lowest rate it'll ever be paid on that money. They receive the equivalent of the old stretch IRA in tax terms, even though the calendar still says 10 years. Let me put numbers on it. A retiree converting $40,000 a year for 10 years at a 22% rate pays roughly $88,000 in conversion tax. That same $400,000 if it passes a traditional IRA. To a working-age adult child in the 32% bracket would have generated roughly $128,000 of federal tax during the 10-year drain. Plus state, plus the disruption of 7 figures of unwanted income landing in the child's highest earning decade. The parent who paid the conversion tax saved the family roughly $40,000 in federal tax, smoothed the child's income across the next decade, and preserved the account's tax-free growth for the years it does keep running. That's the move. There are 4 specific actions that work, that are documented in IRS guidance that protect your beneficiaries from the worst of the new rules. Let me walk through each one. They're in order of how much they pay back. Move 1. Pull every retirement account statement you have and confirm the named beneficiary on each one. Then confirm the contingent beneficiary. If either is missing, blank, or names someone who's passed, your account defaults to your estate. That's one of the worst possible outcomes under the new rules. An estate isn't a designated beneficiary at all, and the distribution period collapses to 5 years instead of 10. I've lost count of how many times I've sat across from a widow who discovered, weeks after the funeral, that the beneficiary form named the ex-husband from 1991. That isn't paperwork. That's your family's tax future. Confirming the names is the easy move. The next one is where the real money is. Move 2. Between the year you retire and the year your own RMDs begin at 73, you sit in the lowest income window of your adult life. Convert as much pre-tax money as you can fit into the 12 and 22% brackets each year without crossing into the 24% bracket or pushing past an earmark cliff. Every dollar you convert at your retirement rate is a dollar your beneficiary never pays tax on at their working rate. This is the move that does the most work. It's also the move most retirees won't do because writing a tax check feels worse than not writing one. It's the same money. Pay it now at your rate, or have your children pay it later at theirs. But there are 2 more moves, and the fourth one trips up almost everyone who tries to do this without a lawyer. Move 3. Talk to an estate attorney about adding what's called per-stirpes language to your beneficiary designations. If a primary beneficiary, say your son, passes before you do, per-stirpes language sends his share to his children, your grandchildren, rather than redistributing it among your other children. Grandchildren generally get the full 10-year window calculated from your death, which is often longer than the window your remaining adult children would have had. It's a small clause. It can be worth a lot. Move 4. Don't name a trust as the beneficiary of your retirement account without specific advice from an estate attorney who handles these regularly. The IRS has very particular rules about which trusts qualify as see-through trusts under the new regulations. Get it wrong, and the entire account collapses into a 5-year distribution window, even when the beneficiaries inside the trust are your adult children who would otherwise have had 10 years. I sat with a couple last year, both in their early 70s, who'd named their family trust as the beneficiary on a $900,000 IRA. The trust language was drafted in 2015, before the Secure Act existed. As written, it wouldn't qualify as a see-through trust under the new rules. Their attorney redrafted it. Cost them about $2,400. Projected tax savings to their children across the inherited drain, roughly $60,000. That conversation paid for itself many times over. A few things to avoid that come up frequently and that don't solve the problem. Don't gift the account to your children while you're still living. Withdrawing the money to give it to them triggers the full income tax on you at your bracket the year of the withdrawal. There's no way to transfer a pre-tax IRA to a living person without first paying income tax on it. People ask me this a lot, hoping the answer is different. It isn't. Don't name a charity and your children as co-beneficiaries on the same account. The charity's presence can disqualify the human beneficiaries from designated beneficiary status and collapse everything into a 5-year window. If you want to leave part of the account to charity, split it into 2 accounts first. Name the charity on one, your children on the other. And don't rely on the "I'll just convert it all to Roth right before I die" plan. Roth conversions are taxable income in the year of conversion. A massive deathbed conversion lands at your top marginal rate in a year that may also include high medical expenses, and it'll push the household into the 32 or 35% bracket. The math doesn't work. Conversions are a multi-year, low-bracket strategy. They don't work as a panic move. So that's the 10-year rule. In tax terms, it's the largest change to how middle-class wealth transfers between generations in 50 years. Most retirees over 60 have never heard of it. Most beneficiaries find out about it months after the parent has passed, when the planning window's already closed. By then, it's too late. The conversations that should have happened didn't. You're watching this in time. The 4 moves work. Confirm your beneficiaries. Run measured Roth conversions in your low-bracket years. Talk to an estate attorney about per-stirpes language and trust qualification. And don't gift. Don't co-name a charity. Don't plan a deathbed conversion. I should say, as I always do, that I'm not a regulated advisor. I'm a person who spent 2 decades reading the rules and sitting across from people who needed this information years before they got it. Nothing here is a substitute for proper advice tailored to your situation. Talk to a qualified tax professional, an estate attorney, or a fiduciary advisor who can look at your numbers across your whole family. This video covers the rule. Your numbers belong to a professional. If that feels like a lot, start with one. Pull your beneficiary forms this week. Look at the names on them. Confirm they still match the family you actually have. Most of the families I've seen lose money to this rule lost it in the gap between an outdated beneficiary form and the family that exists today. Take good care of your accounts and the people who will inherit them.